Three, two, one. Hey.
Hello. Sorry. Yeah, let's go again.
3, 2, 1. Hey. Welcome to episode 4. So we've done 3 others already.
We have.
It has been it is a journey are on. We are developing as we go along and hopefully getting better and finding our groove.
We'll get
hopefully.
Hopefully.
And you are our founding members, joining from the very beginning. So welcome, I suppose, really is the first thing I should say. Welcome. If this is your first episode that you are watching, my name is Daniel.
I'm Ray.
And we're part of Open Cloud, and as part of our business that we do, we wanted to devote some time in talking about kingdom business and being God's stewards and sort of ambassadors in the workplace. So we've come up with this podcast, and like I say, we are on episode 4, and this time we dealt with the easy one of fear last time. So if you wanted to go back, we will go into fear another time again and touch on that. But today it is, what is your capacity? And as always, I'll come in from one sort of point of view and Ray will come in from another point of view. We will have a chat and this will develop and we will see where we get to. But it's quite an interesting question. What is your capacity? Because I think we will all come up with different answers. I suppose the question to that is, what do we think God has to say about our capacity? And what is our life like now? So in terms of business, you could be an entrepreneur, you could be solo in your running your own business, you could be the one-man band with a million different hats. So you pretty much have to have a huge capacity to juggle lots of things and go from one to the other. You could have a huge team of people, and therefore your capacity is more on the lines of managing that team. But if you're dealing with a big team, that's a lot of management managing that you've got to do. So capacity wise, you might be feeling stretched dealing with a large team. So at any point in time in the work environment, anyway, and we'll touch on other sections in a bit, in a work environment, we could, a lot of us feel at full capacity. But that's not always right, I suppose.
Plus you've got your family life on top of all of that, haven't you? And your friendship life. And so we were talking about this just before we started, and think, when you think about capacity, it's not just, we try and compartmentalize, don't we, ourselves a lot of the time. And so we end up falling into this almost like we can almost have a split personality in a kind of way, where we kind of have the work Ray and home Ray, and they're two very, very different people.
Church Ray,
and you can have 3 types of people, and then you got mates Ray, so you got Ray, Ray with the mate, and so you become this very defragmented person if we're not careful. And that's what we were talking about when we're saying, okay, what's your capacity? Because every one of us has a different capacity, and I think that's important that we know that, because sometimes we can often identify our value by what we do more than what we are. And if we're identifying our value by what we do, we can then compare ourselves to somebody else and say, well, they're doing more, so therefore they're more important than me. Or they have more value than me. And it's all because they've got a different capacity. So when we say, what is your capacity, it's very important that we understand, or we at least go on a journey to understand what our capacity is at home, because we have a capacity at home, don't we? We have a capacity at work, we have a capacity at church, we have a capacity with our mates. And that doesn't mean that we become 4 or 5 different people. We're one person managing each of those spheres of our life within our current capacity to manage them all. So
just kind of thinking of scripture there, where it says that it's like we're all different vessels and pots, and some of those have got special meanings and will come out sort of once or twice, and then others are used daily, but they're both important in different ways and used in different ways. So that's really interesting, or a good point to sort of say about judging yourself on other people, and looking if you're seeing someone else running around and doing lots, not to say that they're doing anything better than you. No. You have a different purpose. And that kind of brings us into the sort of what God wants from us.
Yeah, it works from both sides as well, doesn't it? Because you could also say, because I'm doing more than you, I'm more important. And you can come from almost a self-righteous point of view, because you could, and that's just a fleshly thing, that's a soulish thing, and I think we just got to be careful with that stuff, whether it's from a place of insecurity, looking up at someone and saying, wow, they're more important than I am. That's a soulish thing as well. Looking down at somebody else and going, well, that's a soulish mentality as well, isn't it? So you can kind of look from both angles. In both of those things, we have to do, what you just said. What you just said. None of this is scripted, by the way. So this is like we're just inviting you into a conversation that we're having about certain topics, all right? So you may have guessed that by now. None of this is rehearsed. We're having an open conversation, and so we
discuss a little bit on these subjects. When we come up with a subject, we often just before we start recording, we pray, and we try and get ourselves prepared mentally for having these conversations. And thinking about the topics is also something that we try and put some effort into, at least a couple.
This is obviously part of what we do, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this isn't our full-time job. This is part of when we've got time, outside of the busy schedule that we have every day, we then go, right, let's do a podcast. Let's try and bring some time together to do this. And we discuss, and because we do life together really, really well. And we journey together a lot, don't we? We work together, we do a lot of life together.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we talk and share with you about is actually very close to our hearts, because we journey through this a lot. So when we say stuff like, what is your capacity? We can sit here and try and wing it and have a whole conversation. But we really want to be honest with you, because at the end of the day, we're going through the same things that you are going through. And we've, obviously every situation is different. And I know that some things we may never go through, and that's, all right, hear what I'm saying. All right. We're in this journey together, right?
Yeah.
And so I think with yourself, I know what your capacity is, because I've worked with you, I've journeyed with you. You know what my capacity is. And we can look at it from an outside perspective, and we can say, okay, the challenge is out there, guys, for you to know or ask yourselves, what is your capacity? But also at the same time, we're going to be real with each other and say, what is our capacity? Yeah. Because at the same time, our capacity is always growing as well. And that's part of God's plan for us, right?
Yeah. And again, in full honesty and transparency, I know that I've reached capacity and tried to take myself beyond that. And that doesn't do me any good whatsoever. And I often find that those times are the ones where I haven't actually set time aside to just talk with God. When you look at sort of Jesus's life, I love kind of considering what Jesus went through. When you think his ministry started at 30, only sort of 3 years, and the amount that he did.
Yeah.
And when you think he's drawing crowds daily, that is a lot to do. But we're told that Jesus retreated and he spent time with God.
Yeah.
Jesus rested and slept, and he knew what he was able to do in the physical body that he was at. Obviously, being God as well, he knew that he could be beyond that. But these physical bodies that we have need time to rest, and they don't work very well when they're unrested, as we know very well. Both being parents. Fortunately, I'm on the now with older kids.
Yeah.
They don't wake me up as much as they do for you.
No.
But I remember going through that.
Yeah.
And when you're really tired, your capacity is quite minimal.
Yeah,
a lot
rest
smaller.
is the key factor for sure.
Yeah, but God knows that. God
Yeah.
knows that process, and it's making sure that we are taking the right time to rest. There also is a part, I suppose, with God stretching us and stretching our abilities and stretching our capacity. When I look back in my life, I certainly couldn't do some of the things which I've done recently, and I suppose as we go down the track of maturity, there are some things that we won't have the capacity for. The same as like working out, sort of with our muscles, the capacity of our muscles after exercise, after sort of working those out and building those muscles, they've got a larger capacity. So part of life is understanding that your capacity can change, but it's then what are you using that capacity for? I suppose. What does God want that capacity for? And making sure that you don't explode and burn out.
I think there's a couple of things that you've said there that are really good. They're all really good, not just a couple of things, by the way. All of it's been really good. But I want to kind of throw a question at you because you've already kind of touched on it, and I think it's really important that we talk about it because I think other people are going to benefit from this as well. What are the key signs that you have that you know you're taking on too much?
Okay, for the smile.
Okay.
Your wife is usually the one to let you know that you're doing too much.
Yeah.
What the kind of pieces which I notice is the lack of peace.
Okay.
And this is I suppose again one of those journeys in life that you're learning, and if you're aware or you're thinking of them, then you know that you're on a learning journey with God on it. Sometimes as young Christians, you don't necessarily notice that the trials or the journeys in life are there sort of growing you in different ways. For me, certainly beforehand, I wouldn't have recognised if I was doing too much. And you do get burnout, and I can have sort of real low moments, not bordering into sort of major depression, because obviously that we can go into sort of clinical type of issues. But you have those lows in life, and you think my peace is gone. And then when you notice that your peace is gone, then you're not walking in line with God.
Okay. So what does that look like when your peace is gone? Because obviously when you're incredibly busy, it's easy to forget that you're supposed to tune into that sense of peace anyway. Right. So what does that look like in your world when that peace is gone?
For me, it's not. I'm missing that pause, that downtime. You usually find that you're in one moment for a longer period of time. So in work, you're taking longer to do certain things, or the challenges become or feel like they are larger. That's quite key, because I think going through a work life, sometimes you can approach a challenge, a challenge, but you are ready for it. And you attack that challenge and you go through it in peace, and you come out the other side and go, "Oh, that was fine," because I had the capacity to deal with that.
Is that reflected in your emotions?
Yeah, they're kind of in line. When you lose your peace, then you know that you are then starting getting angry with people, or getting angry with yourself, or wanting to throw a computer out the window. They're all experiences that we have, and so understanding that those emotions are building, and you haven't got that time of just breathing out and relaxing. That can be partly down to the work-life balance. spending time with family. Sometimes we're not saying that that's always peaceful.
No.
Sometimes we can have challenges in our family life that then seep it across into the work life.
Yeah, for sure.
But already I'm talking about two different lives. We've spoken about this. We are one person.
Yeah.
Here, but we don't want the complete separation of those. There's got to be sort of that flow between, because God has made us that one person. But yeah, you take those stresses across, and then you find that you're just layering up lots and lots of different stress.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because again, we always try and say, right, we keep our personal life personal and our professional life professional, and that's kind of the ethos that we have at work.
That's a very worldly approach and attitude.
And I think it's where we've kind of had that for a long time, but now we've realized that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
People are struggling with their mental health, and people are struggling with their capacity to handle daily stress. And there is a daily stress, with electric bills going up and down every 5 minutes, or gas bills petrol bills going up and down every 5 minutes, food bills going up. We budget, right? And then we go to the shop and we think we've been extravagant, and we've got like a bag of shopping. It's like, how is this costing this much? It's a bag of shopping. But it's just that's how the world is at the moment, and it's constantly producing a level of stress that we need to adjust our capacity for.
Yeah.
And in order to be able to do that, we need to bring God in.
Yeah.
We need to allow God to increase that capacity. So you've talked about how you've got the signs and the symptoms that you kind of know to look out for now. How long do you think it took you to learn how to look out for those?
It generally gets quicker, and you notice it sooner because you recognize the paths before.
Okay.
In life, if you're not ready to kind of continue to learn in life, then you can oversee these things and these issues. Going back to what you were saying, I quite liked that actually, and it's quite a nice analogy, sort of with finances, a capacity for our finances as well. You budget your finances, and in a sense, we've almost got to budget our capacity.
It's very good, yeah.
And again, when you're sat there looking at numbers and going through, you think, oh, okay, well, let's put that amount in our savings just in case the car blows up again, or those types of things. But in our life's capacity, we should be looking, right, okay, where's my God time in this?
Yeah.
Because I need to have that God time. Otherwise, if I've got nothing in I hate to use the word reserves. That's not the right theology, really. But you're going to run out of reserves if you haven't put God in there. So that's probably a key thing to do, and it's something which I'll put my hands up. I forget to do. It's really a daily thing.
You're not the only one, buddy. And I think when you've got 3 kids, and you don't sleep until 2 a.m., most nights now. At the moment, because two of them are sick. I'm not saying that's me, saying that does happen.
Just a random
throwing out there, just throwing out there as a fact it could happen. But I think we do fall into that trap of life says life is busy, life is crazy, it does get crazy, and I think you do get into that routine of you can slip into a routine of having to fight for time with God. And you do sometimes have to fight for time to get with God, and I think you also have to be flexible with how that time looks sometimes as well. This is what I've found, is that depending on the season of life that I'm in, whether I've got 1 child or 3, but how you study, how you're in the Word, how you're with God, that's got to be really fluid.
Yeah.
It can't be, for me personally, it might be different for other people, but for me, it can never be rigid or set in stone, and it can never be the same way.
Yeah.
Because what demands are different. I've got time restraints now that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
I can't spend, the hours that I did before, do you know what I mean?
And there are some people in life who have got such a almost a rigid day that they actually sort of time in and they know, well, I'm gonna spend time with God at 11 o'clock and at 2 o'clock and things like that. But most people's lives are so random and and can change so much that it has to be fluid.
Yeah, and I think I used to feel condemned for it, for a while, and that was kind of a cause of stress in my world, was because the enemy is condemning me for not having that time that I used to have. But actually, knowing that God is in relationship with me, he's not confined to my devotional time.
Yeah.
And I think when you have that open dialogue with God that goes beyond 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening, whenever you get it, if you've got that open dialogue with God that continues past those moments and it goes throughout every moment of your day, all of a sudden you find that actually things like condemnation about that stuff doesn't set in your heart anymore, because you're actually still in communion with God, no matter what and where you go. And I find in those moments when I'm mindful of the fluidity that I have with God, and I'm not disregarding the study of the Word, I'm not disregarding those things. Those things are important. But I'm thinking just in busy seasons where you don't get the time that you used to have. And I think when you have that fluidity in your relationship with God, where you are constantly in communion with him, that increases my capacity. Emotionally, it increases my capacity for patience. It increases my capacity to do things at work. And it all kind of comes out of that place. Just like you've said, if you don't have that, you quickly notice the difference.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good what you said, and I'm just trying to kind of come at it from a different point.
The other side is that we do have that enemy who does not want us to spend time with God, and he knows that when we don't spend time with God, we are then stuck in this world really where the pressures come in, and the enemy does want us to fail.
Yeah.
To be honest, that he seeks to kill, steal, and destroy type of thing, and that's the position that we don't want to be in.
No, for sure.
And the only way to stop that is making sure that we have that time, that we do make time, that allowance for God in our lives, that we seek him. There have been times where I have got to a point and I'm like praying and praying and praying. It's like, God, I feel really stressed. I feel so distant from you.
Yeah.
And often kind of what I get back is like, you've got to stop. It's like, what is important? And I'm often taken back to, right, okay, what really matters? Does it really matter that I work an extra 3 hours to complete a piece of work, for example? Or would it be better to actually just spend that time with God?
Yeah.
Because if that 3 hours is going to extend to 4 hours or 5 hours, and then I'm not going to know up from down, and that can set me on a course,
that one,
trajectory that God doesn't want me on.
Yeah.
And we've got to work out really, or from God, what is important.
It's that principle of rest, isn't it?
Yeah.
And knowing when to, like what you said, is part of knowing your capacity is knowing when to stop.
Yeah.
And I think we today in this society where I've watched people, in the workplace get so pressured into doing 2 or 3 people's jobs, where they end up not having any time to stop.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real shame, because good people who are good at their job are getting burnt out.
Yeah.
And burnout can be dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous.
And so it's okay. How do we, for people who are listening and coming out of that place of being burnt out, well, if they're feeling burnt out, let me say it this way: if they're feeling burnt out, what do we do? But that's why I throw that at you. Like,
well, when you're burnt out, you go into this mindset of chucking everything out. It's like, and fires start burning. So you want to avoid that. I can imagine kind of listening to me saying these things from a business perspective, going, but I'm going to be letting down some people. I've got to carry on with this work. I've got to carry on this work because if I don't do these extra hours, then I'm not going to earn enough money, or the business isn't going to earn enough money, and we're not going to be able to pay salaries.
Yeah.
I'm going to let down a client, and they're going to go away, and we're going to lose the business. All these things are legitimate sort of responses to that. But I think what we've got to sort of, we've got to put it into that mindset of, in God, we can do anything and all things.
Yeah.
Outside of God, we're doing everything in our own strength, and we are not perfect, and we are not machines.
No.
And we're not God.
Yeah.
It's such a difficult mentality. And like I say, going back to Jesus withdrew himself to God, and then he was able to do miracles and all sorts, and dealing with things, almost forcing yourself to stop and go to God. Go, God, I feel I'm running at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But in you, I can do these things and actually get to where we need to go, because it's in your hands.
Yeah.
Am I making?
Yeah, no, I get it. And again, you're placing your life in God's hands.
Yeah.
And you're surrendering everything to Him, and that's really key. I think it's important to know as well, if you're experiencing burnout, it's not a quick fix.
No.
Burnout's serious, and we don't joke about that stuff, because I've been burnt out. I know you've been burnt out. And burnout can leave you in some really dark places. And it does take a while to come back from. And I say it does take a while. It can take a while. And I think because God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above anything we could ever ask or imagine. So I know that God's grace is able to produce a quicker healing in us than we ever thought possible.
Yeah.
All right. God is also able to restore our bodies, our minds, the chemical imbalances that sometimes we have due to being burnt out and exhausted. So it's really good what you're saying, and recognizing that those things are legitimate things to feel and think. And as a business owner, it's really key that if you are a business owner, if you're running a business, if you're starting something up, or if you're pioneering something, it is important to know where your limits are, what your capacity is. Also understand, I think it's important to know if God's stretching you. Because if you know that God's stretching you, it produces a grace in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's different. If you just feel constantly pressured all the time and there's no seasonal element to it.
Yeah.
It's like I spoke to someone recently, and I said to them, okay, all right, you are full steam ahead 100% of the time. Please tell me when you're planning on stopping. And they're like, oh, in a few years' time. I say, you won't have a few years of this. Yeah. You won't be able to contain a few years of this. I think it's important to understand that when something is seasonal, you recognize it as it's got a time frame to it. And often it's in those moments you sense that God's working on your life and God's growing your capacity and preparing you for something more, because there's a seasonal element to it. There's a time frame attached to it. It's not endless. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, you feel that peace in it.
Yeah.
I know, I know in your life and in my life, there are times where I could look and go, you're doing so much. It's like, how are you managing to do so much? But you're doing so much and in peace in doing it, because God is your supply in doing it. It is amazing. Certain moments in my life, I look back and I think, how did I manage to cram all of that into 10 hours or a week or a month? It's like, this is crazy. And it is seasonal, because God won't ever burn you out.
No.
But he will provide the energy, he'll provide everything that you need for those, especially if he's trying to sort of grow that capacity. The other angle to it is sort of, I suppose, laziness. Sometimes in laziness we can't feel peace,
right?
Because there is a difference between rest and laziness. And sometimes I think we can be lazy and we're out of peace, and you're thinking, well, I've sat down doing nothing for days. I don't think this has ever happened.
I'm trying to think of hypothetical situations. If I was,
but there are times, actually. No, there are times you sat there, you're on a holiday time and everything else, and there are those thoughts where you go, well, I haven't done much really for some time, and there are things which need doing. And you think, oh, I can't be bothered to do any of those, and you kind of jump out of this piece again. You're just being lazy, and you get to the end of the day and you think, I've wasted a day.
I think we kind of we can be our own worst enemies sometimes, can't we? I mean, I think we can come from such a height of busyness, right? And then we can hit such a low where we're just completely still, and we also I think it's good that we have times where we don't do anything. That we actually purposefully rest. But then there's that element where we go, okay, I need to be productive now. And when we choose not to be productive, that's the laziness you're talking about, right? Where we slip into that we start to sort of ignore that productivity urge that's in us. We're ignoring it. And I think where busy people will always be busy. I know people that can't sit still for 5 minutes because they'll have to find something to do.
If you want something done, you always get a busy person to do it.
Exactly, which is great for you, but not always for them. And I think that's key. I think if you're a busy person and you can't sit still for 5 minutes, you've almost got to design your downtime. Because for you, sitting down and relaxing, or sitting down and doing nothing might be relaxing, and you may find joy and peace in that. For somebody else, it may not. It might be the worst thing in the world for them. So, for example, for me, I love to paint, right? I love to do art and all that kind of stuff. It can be the most best. I can love it and I can hate it at the same time, right? Because it can go exactly how I want it to, or it can go completely the opposite and go completely a weird direction I didn't expect it to go. And so, but it's finding something that pleases or satisfies your soul. And I think, without being obviously not in a negative sense, in a good sense, where God designed this about you. God created this about you to enjoy certain things that are unique to your personality. That's the stuff I'm talking about. So when you are finding time for rest or being still, it's important that you're finding something that actually pleases the heart of who you are. And I think it's in those moments we actually are rejuvenated. So we're not looking at the person next to us and saying, oh, well, they're having a week off, they're sitting in front of the TV. That might be how they tick. That might be how that might be how they work. But for me, that's not how I work. And for you, I know that's not how you work. But it's about finding that moment where we can actually go.
There's a very nice feeling when you're able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The question, I suppose, a big question is, what's the bigger picture of this all? When you're looking at capacity, when you're looking at your life and going through life, what is the bigger picture? Where is God sort of taking you to? Where is it we're going to end up? Well, we're going to end up in eternity in paradise with God. But what's the purpose of life?
What's the purpose of life? Easy.
Well, but as we go through these, I do think this life is here to sort of teach us these things. I think many people could be in that mindset of, oh, when you die, we get new bodies and we forget everything that's happened there. But I feel this is almost like a training ground in a sense.
Yeah.
And we've got to be very wary of what God is trying to teach us and what God's trying to do in us. If the end game is that when we're in paradise, we're put in our perfected bodies and everything else, then are there lessons here that we should be learning?
Absolutely. I think, with what we're doing now and what we're going through now, everything is developing our character and our capacity.
Yep.
And within that capacity and within our character development, we develop responsibility. We also develop trustworthiness. We also develop things like empathy and understanding and wisdom.
Yeah.
And so those things are really developed within the training ground of life. Those aren't things that are done overnight. These are things that are done over time. And so I think what God's doing is that he's using the stresses and the strains of this world to produce, if we allow him to, that's the key. If we allow him to, he will produce in our lives capacity for empathy, understanding, wisdom, and understanding. And I think and trustworthiness, obviously, as well, to be able to manage and steward what we're currently operating in. Because then what happens is when we enter into eternity and when we enter into the realm that God resides in now, is that we become responsible for over things in heaven.
Yeah.
God doesn't want us to just sit there counting daisies, or, counting daisies, that's not a real thing, is it? Daisy chain, making daisy chains. What's the analogy we always hear? Making daisy chains.
Yeah, that'll do.
That'll do. Whatever it is. We're not going to sit on a fluffy cloud
with a harp.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, and some wings.
So rewind. Anyway, so we're not going to sit into heaven doing nothing. We're going to be busy. We're going to be doing stuff. We're going to be productive. We're going to be creating stuff. We're going to be managing stuff. We're going to be God's going to trust us with certain things in the heavenly places, as much as he is here. And I think it would just take on a whole new dimension, and it will only increase, and it just grow and grow and grow and grow. I mean, this is now where we start to imagine what heaven looks like, right? This is now when we start to imagine what things are going to look like when we're managing.
Episode 5.
Yeah, 6 and 7. But can you get what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know if you guys are following me out there or not, but it's just now we sort of begin to see the big picture is not just about what we do here, but how what we do here is a training ground, like you said, where God is developing everything he needs to for us to be able to manage things well in eternity.
And the whole reason kind of for the raising the bigger picture is when you understand that bigger picture, you can then go into the macro and kind of look at, right, today I'm really stressed out and I've got no peace.
Yeah, no, very good.
And I'm feeling like I'm heading down the line of burnout. What do I do? And I think the key points for anyone who's feeling like that is firstly, force yourself to stop, draw yourself away. Like it says, sort of go into your room, close the door, just one-to-one time with God. And that can be very difficult, especially if you're in a bad headspace.
Yeah.
It can be a hard thing to do because sometimes you're just there, sometimes blubbering, sometimes just not saying anything because you can't even process anything which is going on because your head is still working at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you're going, right, okay, body and flesh, this is now spirit inside saying stop. And you've got to slam on the brakes, and it takes some time to kind of stop. But alongside that, it's also making sure that you're walking with good people, walking with Christian brothers and sisters who you can talk to. That's the beauty of like our relationship, and that's how we're able to chat and talk for hours and hours, because we're interested in each other's lives and making sure that each other's trying to gets the best or getting the best walk with God. So having those people around you, and even from a bigger picture, we want to kind of support those people, you guys out there as well. So we want to build a network where there is that support, where someone can say to us, look, I'm really struggling. Can you help? And we pray for each other.
Yeah.
We've both been in positions where we've just said to each other, "Look, I'm going to pray for you," and that's such an encouragement. But also in the spiritual realm, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It's kind of wiping that or swiping the enemy off you in the spiritual to allow that time for you to have that closeness with God.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I think journeying with people that know your capacity is really important.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that plays a big part.
Yeah.
That plays a huge part. Again, when you're trying to manage all this stuff on your own, and you don't have people in your world that are watching for when you are showing signs of weakness or frailty, that can be dangerous. But having people in your world that can say, "You're not okay, are you?"
Yeah.
And also I think that's catching someone at the bottom. But also I think it's important to catch them when they're at the top. Because you get people that are running off, and this is, I know we've been talking a while, but I want to home in on this real quick. Often we don't realize we're on a path to burnout until we're on our way down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But actually burnout, the first sign of burnout is when we're running off of adrenaline.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think when we can get to a point where we're putting out to the point where we know we're tired, but then we keep going and we're going. And it gets to a point where if that's prolonged, we're starting to run off of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And that can really be a very depleting thing.
Yeah.
And actually could be quite dangerous. And that leads us into exhaustion, which then leads us into burnout. So I think it's important to have people that recognize your world and see your world for what it is, and see you not when you're at the bottom, but when you're at the top.
Yeah.
When you're running off of adrenaline, when you're running high, and you look like you're accomplishing a lot, and you're like, "Look at all the stuff I'm doing. It's great." Yeah, I'm now watching you because I'm now watching you to see how you're managing that.
Yeah.
And it's great what you're doing, but know when to stop.
Yeah.
And I think those people are very important.
You've got the phrase, "Pride comes before a fall."
Yeah.
And that's really important, because as individuals, it's not necessarily natural for us to accept people talking into our lives. And again, if you're finding yourself stressed and you are beginning to recognize you could be getting that curve, you do not want pride in place. And when someone's trying to help you, you knock them down because you don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
You have to sort of go, right, okay. And this is where journeying with someone and having a close relationship with another Christian brother or sister is so vital, because you build that trust, you build that friendship, and you learn to listen to them.
Yeah.
You learn about them, and I can say something to you, and I can help you as much as I possibly can. But if you're not willing to listen and take that on board, then it goes nowhere. You're still going to head towards that. And that's where pride can come before that fall. So making sure that you're in a position where you are actively listening and allowing someone to speak into your life is so important as well.
Yeah.
If you're at that stage, more than likely you are actively switching off to God, because God is probably, and this is something which has happened and something that I've noticed and learnt from, God does start speaking to you before you get to that danger zone.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you start switching off to that, then it becomes harder and harder to listen to God.
You numb it down, don't you?
You numb it down. The same thing can happen with people in your life as well. And those people in your life are sort of echoing God. God sometimes placed that person in your life to tell you need to stop. You're at capacity, but you're not listening to them. So again, you have to force yourself to just stop. Take yourself off and think, right, okay, this person speaking into my life, is there something I need to be concerned about?
Yeah.
Take a hard look at your own life, then, and kind of go from there.
Yeah. Sometimes what I've found as well is that sometimes it's not even about stopping. It's about repositioning.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, especially if we're in leadership, there are certain things that we can delegate that we don't delegate because we like to do them.
Yeah.
There's some things that, there's the whole key principle of balance, which is really important. I think we could probably talk about that on another podcast, but because that in itself is a very big topic. And I've heard some amazing teachings on balance, and I think it's incredible. And maybe we could share some of that with the people that are listening here. And we'll put links and stuff in the description as well of anything that we talk about that's beyond our conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really important to know sometimes it's just not. Sometimes it's not stopping. Sometimes it's repositioning.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we can't. Like literally, if you're running a business, depending on the scale of your business, or even if it's a small business, there's an element of you that can't stop because otherwise the business stops.
Yeah.
Knowing that God is working with you in your world, and knowing that God is working with you to restore that peace and that grace to be able to do what you're doing, also provides that wisdom to say, okay, now it's time to pass this on. Or now it's time to maybe bring that back so it's not so much of a priority to you at the moment, but allow that to set here for now. Prioritize this so you can focus on that. So you're constantly managing not just your time, but what you're prioritizing within that time.
Yeah.
So, and also I think it's not just repositioning your priorities, it's also repositioning yourself. And like this is where you said about being still, stopping and all that kind of stuff, but also making sure that we're in church, making sure that we are positioning ourselves in a place to receive.
Yeah.
Because again, you may not have time to sit and have coffee with people. You may not have time to go and sit in, life group or whatever it is that you do in your community, in your congregation or in your church. But it's very important to position ourselves in a place where we can receive the word and receive the word, but also worship.
Yeah.
And I think those two things are really, really key. And being in church just is common sense, isn't it? It's just real good to just prioritize that and position yourself in that place. It's a really healthy place to be.
And what can happen and what happens most of the time is that we're only a degree or so off.
Yeah.
But down the line, we're now far away from where God actually wants us to. And that's where we've got to be ready for being nudged back.
That's it.
And repositioned for that. And I think, and I really do believe, like, church is part of that repositioning. How many times have you walked into church and the message is like the pastor has specifically looked at your life and gone, I'm going to say exactly this because this is what God's saying into your life. And that is God at work.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So yeah, loads there. We've spoken about. We're at full capacity, probably.
Full capacity, yeah.
But yeah, loads there. Again, a bit like the fear topic that we talked about last time. If you feel like you are running beyond your capacity, you feel that you've lost your peace, you feel that you're struggling to deal with everything, then reach out to someone.
Yeah.
Reach out to us. We'll have contact details on the just down below, because we want to help. That's the whole purpose for doing this podcast. It's not just so we can have a chat, because we could do this chat anywhere at any time. This is to just bring God into other people's world.
That's it.
If you're listening to this, it might affect you. And hopefully it will help you and again nudge you back to where God wants you to be. It may be just a word that you think, right, okay, I need to share this with someone because I know they're going through trouble. So feel free, share it across to people that you might think of that this might help, because we've all been through different journeys. We're not belittling any journey, but we are here to kind of help and bring God into that journey and bring God into your business world as well.
I think it's also key as well. We're a business. We have a business and we run a business, and if you're running a business and you find yourself stretched in your capacity just because you could probably do with a little bit of training in a certain area, and just having that little bit of wisdom, that little bit of training and development in a certain area could really increase your capacity within the company and within your ability to run your business. So if you feel like you need a little bit of training, or if you want us to point you in a direction, or hook you up with someone that could help you get that training you feel like you need, please send us an email, and we can just we can provide you with information, at least provide you with some information.
We're blessed with a large network of contacts.
Yeah, for sure,
and growing as well. So we can certainly help and support.
No, brilliant.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us on episode 4, OC, for this reason. Thank you.
See you later.